Welcome, friends, to a new science fiction story. In this episode, we'll be listening to the story of Liam and the alien vampire woman, Luna. Grab your coffee and get ready to dive into this amazing science fiction tale. Enjoy. I got on the wrong ship and now I'm on an alien planet. The first person I met was an alien vampire woman. The thing nobody tells you about orbital stations is that they are designed by people who have never been late for anything. Halvern Orbital had 400 gates arranged in a spiral, numbered by a system that Liam suspected had been chosen by lottery, and a public address system that broadcast in a language best described as apologetic static. He had been awake for 31 hours. He had a duffel bag with a broken strap, and he had spent the last of his patience arguing with a customs drone about whether a jar of pickled onions constituted agricultural cargo. It did not. It had taken 11 minutes to establish this. The onions had been confiscated anyway, out of what Liam could only interpret as spite. So when the boarding chimes sang and the crowd surged and a steward in a mustard-colored uniform waved him toward a gangway with the enthusiasm of a man being paid by the gesture, Liam did not check the number. He was thinking about his apartment. He was thinking, specifically, about the particular shape of his mattress and how it had learned him over the years, the way a good chair learns a person, and he boarded Transport 9 with the serene confidence of a man boarding Transport 6. He slept beautifully. That was the insult of it. 14 jumps and he slept like a stone in a riverbed, and the ship's dream fields fed him something about a beach. He woke because the silence had changed. Ships are never quiet. There is always the hum, the throat clearing of the recyclers, the distant percussion of someone else's luggage. This silence had weight. Liam sat up in a cabin that was already dark, already cold, already stripped, and understood in the slow, sinking way of a man reading his own bank statement that the ship had emptied itself and nobody had thought to check the cheap berths. The airlock stood open. Beyond it was fog. Not weather fog. This was violet, dense as poured milk, and it moved with intention, curling around his ankles as he stepped onto the platform like something taking his measurements. Above it hung a sky the color of a bruise 3 days old, and there was no sun in it. There was no anything in it. Just a dim, even, endless dusk, the light of a room where someone has fallen asleep with the lamp on in the next hall. "Right," said Liam, to nobody. "Fine." Behind him the transport sealed itself, apologized in 3 languages, and left. The terminal was enormous, and it was dead. Dust lay on the ticket counters in a smooth gray pelt, undisturbed, the kind of dust that takes decades and commitment. Benches sat in patient rows. A vending machine glowed faintly in the far wall, which meant power, which meant somebody somewhere was still paying a bill, which struck Liam as the single most hopeful fact available to him. The departure board above the concourse still worked. It listed 1 flight. It promised, in cheerful amber letters, that Service 11 to Kesh Anchorage would be departing at 1940, and the date beside it was 41 years old. Liam stood in the middle of that vast hall and did what he always did under pressure, which was inventory. Auditor's reflex. 1 duffel bag, broken strap. 1 coat, insufficient. 1 data slate, no signal, 11% charge. 0 onions, thanks to a drone with a grudge. He was, by profession, a cargo manifest auditor, and he had spent 9 years finding the exact place where a shipment had gone wrong, and it occurred to him with a certain bleak elegance that he had now become his own case file. That was when he saw her. She was standing beneath a broken lamp at the mouth of the concourse, perfectly still, and he could not have said how long she had been there. The lamp above her flickered in an arrhythmic stutter, and every time it caught, it lit her up bone white. Not pale the way people are pale, but pale the way marble is pale. Pale as something quarried. Her hair was dark and her ears were long, swept back and tapering to points that rose above the line of her hood. Her eyes reflected the light. Actually reflected it. A flat green shine, the way a cat's do in a doorway at night, and something small and old at the base of Liam's spine sat up and told him to be very, very interesting to look at, and very, very hard to catch. She tilted her head. She came forward without hurrying. 9 years of manifests had taught Liam that the truly dangerous items are always the ones that arrive calm. "You came off the ship," she said. Her voice was low and unbothered, and when she spoke he saw the fangs. Small, delicate, almost fastidious, nothing like the tusks his imagination had been busily sketching. That helped for about a second and a half. "I did," said Liam. "I want to be clear that this wasn't the plan. My luggage is currently on a completely different planet, living a better life than me, and honestly, good for it." She looked at him. Nothing moved in her face. Somewhere far off, water dripped into water. "Tough room," Liam said. "You are a long way off course." She said it the way a surgeon says interesting. "How?" "Gate 9 looked like Gate 6. I'd been awake for 31 hours. They took my onions." "You're—" She stopped, decided not to pursue it, and glanced past him toward the doors, where the violet fog pressed against the glass like something breathing on it. When she looked back, her eyes had changed, marginally. "Listen carefully. It is dusk here. It is always dusk here. In 2 hours it will be dark, and if you are standing in these streets alone when it is, you will die considerably faster than I would ever kill you." That's a strange amount of reassurance to build into one sentence. It is the only kind available. She turned. "Come." She didn't explain. She simply walked. And Liam, having weighed his options and found the list distressingly short, followed her out into the fog. The street beyond was cobbled, wet, lined with tall, crooked houses whose windows glowed the dull orange of banked fires, and in the doorways of those houses stood figures, pale ones. He counted 6, then 9, then stopped counting. They watched him with an attention he recognized instantly and did not enjoy. An attention he had last seen on the faces of men in a dockside canteen when the lunch trolley came through the door. None of them stepped out. Not one. They saw the woman walking half a pace to his left, and they stayed exactly where they were. "They're not following," Liam said quietly. "No." "Any particular reason?" "Yes," said Luna, and told him nothing else for 11 streets. But he noticed she walked closer than she needed to, and he noticed, when the lamplight swung across them, that she never once looked at him the way the others did. Morning on Illyra, Liam learned, was a technicality. It arrived not as light, but as a change in the quality of the dark, the violet thinning to something closer to the inside of a plum, and the fog lifting just enough to reveal that the city had been built by people with a deep philosophical objection to straight lines. Luna's house stood at the end of a lane so narrow he could touch both walls, 3 stories of black stone with a door that had been repaired more often than it had been opened. She had given him a room with a bed in it, a basin, and a window shuttered from the outside. He had slept badly and woken to the smell of something roasting that he decided, on balance, not to ask about. She was at the table with a ledger, writing in a hand so small it looked like a rash. "There are rules," she said, without looking up. "You will learn them today, or you will die of them tomorrow." "I love a briefing," said Liam. "Do we have visual aids?" "Rule 1. You do not tell anyone what you are." "Which is what exactly?" "Because from where I'm standing, I'm a mid-grade auditor with a lower back problem." Luna set down the pen. "You are the first human to walk this city in 400 years. There are songs about your species. Most of them are about the taste." "Ah," said Liam. "Lovely. And here I came without a napkin." The second rule turned out to be economic, and it was the one that broke his brain. Illyra ran on blood. Not metaphorically, not in the tiresome way that people back home said money was blood while sitting in heated offices, literally, physically, as legal tender. Every adult carried a ledger vial at the hip, a slim ampule of dark glass with a graduated scale down one side, sealed with a house stamp and readable by any till in the city. Wages were drawn in milliliters. Rent was quoted in decile. A century ago, the sky had closed. The crops had gone, and the Illyrian metabolism had been quietly redesigned by desperation and some very inventive gene work into something that could subsist on the enzyme-rich blood of its neighbors, which meant everyone was simultaneously a laborer, a bank, and a lunch. Liam, who had spent 9 years auditing the movement of grain and machine parts, found himself standing in a market square trying to hold two ideas in his head at once and dropping both. "So the economy is a circle," he said. "You all just drink each other in a ring." "It is a system," said Elena, who had appeared beside them somewhere around the fish stalls and had not left since. She was small, sharp-eyed, ink-stained to the second knuckle, and worked in the house archive, which appeared to involve no archiving and a great deal of knowing things. "It is regulated. There are conversion rates. There is a board. There's always a board." The market taught him the rest by humiliation, which is the fastest school there is. He tried to tip a barkeep with 2 milliliters from the courtesy vial Luna had grudgingly issued him, and discovered that offering unsolicited blood in a public house was, depending on the district, either a marriage proposal or a declaration of a debt feud. The barkeep, enormous gray-haired, ears like sail canvas, went absolutely still. Elena laughed so hard she had to sit on a crate. Luna said 9 quiet words, and the barkeep withdrew his hand, took the vial, and returned it with the seal untouched, and did not look at Liam again for the rest of the visit. "What did you say to him?" "That you were foreign and stupid. 9 words for that? Your language is very efficient." 4 of them were about how foreign. Then there was the vending machine. It stood on the corner of the flower lane, humming, and it was a beautiful piece of pre-collapse engineering with brass fittings and a display that scrolled in 3 scripts, and it had a lancet port on the front, and when Liam put his hand near it to read the menu, it extended a needle with the brisk enthusiasm of a machine that had waited a long time for company. He got his hand back. Barely. He then spent 6 full minutes arguing with it about exchange rates. It had assessed him at a valuation it refused to justify, quoting a table last updated during an administration that no longer existed, and it was Elena who finally pointed out, gently, that he was shouting at a device that sold pastry. "It insulted me. It complimented you. That number is very high. Then why does it feel like an insult?" "Because," said Luna, "it is a price." That was the first moment the day stopped being funny. He learned about her post over the following hours, in pieces, mostly from Elena, because Luna answered direct questions about herself the way a wall answers a knock. She was the warden of the threshold. It was an inherited office, 4 centuries old, and it meant she kept the port. She maintained the terminal lights, logged arrivals, and greeted every ship that came down through the shade. The last ship had come down 41 years ago. She still walked out to the platform at every scheduled hour and stood beneath the broken lamp, because the office did not have a clause for pointless. For this, the house paid her a stipend, and the stipend had been quietly shaved thinner every decade by committees who could not defend cutting it entirely and could not stomach paying it in full. "How thin?" Liam asked. Elena looked at the shuttered window. "Thin." "How thin, Elena?" "Protection is bought," she said, and her voice had lost its sparkle entirely. "You are walking around under a name. Everyone in this city has seen what you are, and not one hand has touched you. And that is not manners, human. That is a standing surety, posted daily, against every claim that might be made on you. It comes out of her ration." Liam stood very still in a crooked lane on a world with no sun and did the arithmetic. He was extremely good at arithmetic. It was, in fact, the only thing he had ever been unambiguously good at, and he ran the numbers 3 times hoping to find an error, a rounding, a merciful decimal. There wasn't one. Every day he stayed alive here, someone was paying for it in milliliters. Word did not so much spread as precipitate. By the 3rd day, the flower lane had a fresh crowd in it every time Liam passed, and by the 4th, there were children selling their places at the corner where he usually turned. Elena brought the reason to the house in a folded broadsheet and laid it on the table with the delicacy of someone presenting a bill. The enzyme had a name. Liam couldn't pronounce it. The Illyrian word had a click in the middle that his mouth refused on principle. What it meant was simple enough. When the sky closed, the Illyrians had rebuilt their metabolism around borrowing from each other, and the borrowing worked. But every cycle it lost a fraction, the way a copied page loses its blacks. 4 centuries of copying. The enzyme that started the chain was gone from their blood entirely, manufactured now in vats by 2 houses at ruinous cost, rationed to the sick and the pregnant and the politically fortunate. Human blood was thick with it. Liam produced the stuff in his liver, absent-mindedly, for free, while thinking about other things. "So I'm not a person," he said. "I'm a mint." "You are a mint with legs," Elena agreed. "Which is worse because a mint stays where you put it." Adrian arrived that afternoon, and he arrived properly. A car with a driver, in a city that had 11 working cars, and a coat with a collar cut so high and sharp it should have required a permit. He was tall and unhurried and beautiful in the specific way of a man who has never once been hungry, and when he removed his gloves, he did it 1 finger at a time, like a man opening a very small negotiation. "Warden," he said, bowing to Luna at exactly the depth the office required and not a degree more. "And the guest, Adrian, assessor of the 5th house. May I sit?" "No," said Luna. He sat. He produced from his case a contract thick as a hymnal, bound in gray ribbon, and set it on the table with a sound like a door closing somewhere in the building. Liam, professionally, could not help reading upside down. Clause density. Appalling. Somebody had been paid by the subsection. "I'll be brief, because you'll dislike me either way," Adrian said pleasantly. "Custody of the asset transfers to the 5th house. Voluntary donation schedule, medically supervised, twice weekly, generous recovery intervals. We're not butchers, whatever the broadsheets say. In exchange, the threshold receives an annuity in Farron at 9% above the guild rate. Backdated 40 years, plus the maintenance arrears the house has quietly failed to pay you since your grandmother's time." He let that land. "It is more wealth than your line has held in a century. You would never stand under that lamp again unless you wanted to." There was a silence in which Liam discovered he had a pulse in his ears. Luna did not look at the contract. "He is not an asset, and I am not for sale." 11 words. Liam counted them later, several times in the dark. Adrian's face did something complicated, and then settled back into charm. He gathered his gloves. At the door he paused, and for one strange moment he sounded almost kind. "Warden, every claim posted against him is posted against you. There are 19 so far. There will be more. You are a woman standing in front of a tide with a very good name and a very small vial." He nodded to Liam. "Sir, my condolences on your circumstances, and hers." Liam sat with that for 4 hours, and then did something stupid, which is what men do when they cannot sit with things. His reasoning had a lovely clean shape to it. If the problem was that Luna was paying for him, he would go and stop being expensive. He would find a broker, sell his own blood on his own terms, clear the standing surety, and hand her back her ration like a man returning a borrowed coat. He got as far as the 3rd alley off the flower lane before the clean shape of the reasoning met 3 entrepreneurs and dissolved entirely. They were not monsters. That was the part he kept coming back to. They were thin and nervous, and one of them apologized while another got an arm across his throat. And the third had a lancet clamp, the cheap kind. The kind you buy when you cannot afford the kind that seals afterward. He fought like an auditor. He got an elbow into somebody's ribs and a knee into somebody's thigh, and then the world went narrow and hot, and he heard very clearly his own blood hitting the cobbles in a rhythm like a tap left running. Then Luna was there, and the alley rearranged itself. He never got a clear look at it. There was a sound he'd remember, a short, wet crack, and a great deal of shouting in which one word repeated often enough that he asked about it afterwards. "Vosh," Elena told him later, delighted. "It means ouch. It also means ow, oh no, and please stop hitting me with that." Very efficient language. You said so yourself. He came back to himself on Luna's table with his sleeve cut away and his arm laid open in a neat diagonal, and she was working over it with a curved needle and a lamp pulled close, and her hands were absolutely steady, and her mouth was a hard, flat line. You went to sell yourself, she said. I went to fix it. You went to market. The needle went through. Do you know what your blood costs? Do you know what 19 claims means? You would have been bled to a shell by men who cannot afford a ceiling clamp, and I would have found what was left in a gutter with a receipt in its pocket, and you would have called that fixing it. I didn't want you paying for me. Then be worth it, she snapped, and stopped, and set the needle down. The lamp hissed. His blood was on her hands, on the cloth, in a dish at her elbow, and Liam realized with a lurch that this was the first time he had ever seen it in front of her. Doesn't that? He stopped, tried again. Isn't that difficult? Luna looked at the dish for a long moment. I have never tasted human blood, she said. In 400 years my line has kept the threshold and not one of us has, and I do not intend to find out what it is like. She picked up the needle again. I suspect it would be like a first cigarette, educational, and permanent. That's very nearly a compliment. It is very nearly a warning. With you, said Liam. I've stopped being able to tell the difference. And Luna, bent over his arm, made a small sound that was not quite a laugh, but was closer to one than anything he'd heard on that world. The archive was in the cellar of a building that had once been a granary, which Elena described as either the bitterest joke on the planet or simply what happens when nobody clears out the paperwork. They went in through a coal hatch at what passed for midnight, because 19 claims had become 31 and the flower lane had stopped being survivable in daylight, insofar as there was any. Inside it was cold and enormous and smelled of dust and dead mice and the particular sweetness of decaying adhesive. Shelves ran back into the dark further than the lamp could argue with. Somewhere in the second aisle a machine was still running, a slow tick and sigh that Elena said had been going since before she was born, and that nobody was allowed to switch off because the switch had been classified. Make yourself comfortable, she said, dumping a blanket on a crate. Nobody comes here. Half the houses have forgotten it exists, and the other half owe it money. Liam looked down the aisles with the expression of a man who has just been shown, unexpectedly, a very large cake. Oh no, said Elena. What? You've gone fond. He had. It was the smell. 9 years of dockside record hauls, and it turned out the smell was the same on every world in the catalog, which was oddly the most comforting thing that had happened to him since the airlock opened. They found James on the 4th night. Not a body, a signal, logged and relogged in a maintenance file that nobody had read since the recording of it. A beacon at 41.6 megahertz repeating a distress loop out of the Tessic salt flats. A survey vessel. 1 man aboard. Gone down through the shade 380 years ago. The loop said his name and his ship's registry and asked, with fraying politeness, for anyone at all. That's him, Liam said. That's your vampire myth. 1 crashed pilot with a bad landing and a rare enzyme, and 400 years of songs about the taste. Luna, who had spent 4 nights reading in absolute silence, said, He was real. He was a surveyor, Luna. He had a clipboard. But it was the crates behind the beacon file that undid everything, and they undid it because Liam physically could not walk past an unread manifest. It was a defect of character. He had once been late to his own sister's wedding because a freight ledger in the lobby had a discrepancy in it. The crates held the colonial terraforming records, full set, sealed, the original flimsies with the counter-signatures still legible, and by the second night he had them spread across the granary floor in a great fan, and was crawling around them on his knees with the lamp muttering. The shade, he said, at some point past the 4th hour. Elena, half asleep on a crate. Everybody says the shade was destroyed. Sabotage, war, the enemy fleet, take your pick. I've heard 6 versions, and one of them had a dragon in it. That version is very popular. It wasn't destroyed. He sat back on his heels. His voice had gone strange and flat. Luna, bring the lamp. The orbital sunshade over Elira had been a piece of standard climate furniture, a lattice of reflective sail 60,000 kilometers across, built to shave 4% off a slightly too eager sun. It closed on a schedule for maintenance, twice a century, for 11 days at a stretch. In the year the sky went dark, it had closed exactly on time. The reopening order had been raised exactly on time, too. It was there. Liam had it in his hand, a flimsy, pale blue, stamped correct, requesting resumption of aperture at the standard hour, and filed against Colonial Works Contract 4471-B. Contract 4471-B had been dissolved 9 days earlier, in a routine administrative handover, when the Colonial Works Authority was folded into the Outer Reach Development Office, and every existing contract was reissued under a new numbering convention beginning with the prefix D. So the order went to a contract that didn't exist, Luna said. The order went nowhere. It bounced. It generated an exception notice. He turned over the next flimsy, and there it was, printed in the mild, incurious language of automated systems everywhere. Item returned. Reference not recognized. Resubmit under current schedule. And the exception notice went to the office that had just been dissolved, which had no staff, because they'd all been transferred. So it sat in a queue. He looked up. It's still in the queue, Luna. Technically. Somewhere in that lattice there is a job ticket that has been marked pending clarification for 406 years, Elena said very carefully. Are you telling us the sky is shut because of a filing error? I'm telling you the sky is shut because of a prefix. There was a long silence in the granary. The classified machine ticked and sighed. And then Liam laughed. He didn't mean to, and he couldn't stop it. It came up out of him in great tearing whoops, and he laughed until he had to put a hand on the floor, and there were tears running down his face and into his collar, because he had spent 9 years of his life on exactly this, on the small, stupid places where a number does not match a number. And every one of those 9 years he had been told by somebody that it didn't matter, that it was only paperwork, that nobody ever died of a clerical error. 400 years, he wheezed. 400 years of fangs, of songs, of a woman with a needle telling me what my own blood is worth, and it's a prefix, it's a letter, it's one letter. Somebody didn't press D. Stop, said Luna. He stopped. She was standing over the flimsies with the lamp in her hand, and her face in that light was the whitest thing in the room, and she was not laughing, and Liam's own laughter died in his throat like something stepped on, because he had been thinking of it as a joke on history. And she was standing there doing the other arithmetic, that the hunger was not a judgment, not a curse, not the price of some ancestral sin, that the ledger vials and the conversion rates and the board and the houses and every careful, brutal 400-year-old rule that made a person into a currency had all been built, patiently, magnificently, on nothing at all. That she had been dying by milliliters, politely, for a stranger, for no reason whatsoever. Luna, he said, do not. The lamp shook very slightly, and she set it down before it could betray her further. Not yet. Let me be angry first. It is the only thing in this room I am certain I am entitled to. The correction, it turned out, was 11 characters long. Resubmit the aperture order under the D prefix, append the original countersignature, and any maintenance relay in the lattice would accept it as a routine backlog item and get on with its afternoon. That was the good news. The bad news occupied the rest of the night. You need a transmitter that can reach orbit, Elena said, ticking it off on ink-stained fingers. And there hasn't been one in this city since the port array was stripped for scrap in my mother's time. And you need a house seal at assessor grade or above because an unsigned order is just a man shouting at a satellite. And the transmitter? Your surveyor, James, Salt Flats, 4 hours by cart, assuming the cart survives, which it won't. And the seal? Elena smiled with all her teeth, which on Illyra was a considerable amount of smiling. Adrian keeps his in a signet on his left hand, and he takes it off for exactly one thing, the quarterly auction, because the guild requires bare hands at the block. It's Thursday. The plan they built over the next 2 days was elegant in the way of things designed by an archivist with a gambling problem, a warden with nothing left to lose, and an auditor. Elena would run a distraction using the auction's own rules against it, a rigged lot, a false provenance, 3 shills, and a payout table she had personally maintained for 11 years, and therefore knew every soft place in. Luna would be near the block. And Liam, because the houses had spent a fortnight tripping over each other to bid on him and would therefore attend anything he was rumored to be at, would be the lot. "Let me be clear," he said, standing in the fitting room in a gray silk shift that tied at the shoulder. "You have dressed me as a vintage." "You are a very rare vintage," said Elena. "I have a bow on me." "That is a provenance ribbon." "It is a bow, Elena, and it is the largest indignity of a life that has recently included being priced by a pastry machine." The auction hall was a converted cistern, tiered stone benches going down and down to a lit block in the center, and it was full, and it was loud, and it smelled of wet wool and money. Liam went in hooded on a lot chain that wasn't locked, feeling the whole room turn toward him like grass under wind. Elena's rigged lot came up at position 9. It did precisely what it was designed to do: a disputed provenance, an outraged third house factor on his feet howling about forgery, 2 shills escalating, and a payout table that suddenly, catastrophically, could not resolve who owed what to whom. The hall came apart into 100 simultaneous arguments about clause interpretation, which is the closest thing Elira had to a riot. Luna reached the block. The signet was in her hand, and Adrian's hand closed around her wrist. He had not, it emerged, been standing where any of them thought he was standing. He was very calm about it, which was worse. "Warden," he said, "you would have needed to be quicker than that. In fairness, so would I." Liam got the hood off and came down the tier steps with the bow still on him, which took a certain courage. "Let go of her." "Or?" Adrian's eyebrows moved fractionally. "Forgive me. I'm not being cruel. I'm being curious. What is the end of that sentence?" "I know why the sky is shut," Liam said. The hall was still coming apart around them. Adrian's expression didn't change and his grip didn't loosen, but something behind his eyes performed a very fast calculation. "Yes," he said. "So do I." Liam stopped on the 3rd step. "You. 5th house holds the archive's index, not the archive. The index." Adrian let go of Luna's wrist, unhurried, and did not take the signet back. "My grandfather found it. He read the terraforming file, he understood it, and he sat down and did the only honest thing a man in his position could do, which was calculate what happens to the Farron standard when blood stops being scarce." He gestured at the roaring cistern above them. "Everything here is collateralized against a hunger. Open the sky, and you don't liberate these people. You detonate them. Every debt, every annuity, every house, worthless inside a season." "Then let it be worthless," said Luna. "You say that because you have nothing." It came out sharper than he intended, and he heard it, and for a moment, the beautiful coat looked like a costume. "I say it because I have everything, and it is made of the same paper. I am not the villain of this, Warden. I am simply the man who read the ledger first. You are the man who offered to buy him." "I offered to keep him alive," Adrian snapped. 19 claims, 31 now. You cannot post surety against a city forever, and when you fail, and you will fail, madam, arithmetic is not sentimental. They will take him apart in a gutter. In my custody, he would have grown old." "In your custody, he would have grown farmed," said Luna. She stepped back, and she put the signet on the block between them. And then she said the thing Liam had been dreading since he saw her face in the granary. "The threshold," she said. "The office, the house, the name, the last holdings of my line, yours, signed over tonight, all of it, for one seal." Adrian went absolutely still. "You would be nothing." "I have been nothing for some time. I have simply been very well dressed about it." "Absolutely not," said Liam. "No, take me instead. Sign the custody thing, the contract, whatever it was, I'll do it. Twice weekly, medically supervised, generous recovery intervals. You had a lovely brochure. You will not. You don't get to spend 400 years of your family, so I can. It is mine to spend." "You too," Adrian observed, "are having a competition to be the most expensive person in the room, and I want you both to understand how strange that is from where I'm standing." Somewhere above them a brazier went over, and the wet wool and money smell acquired smoke. Adrian looked up at his burning auction, and at the woman offering him 4 centuries, and at the man in the silk shift with the bow. and something in his face gave way that had been holding for 3 generations. "Take it," he said, and pushed the signet across the block. "For the record, I think you are about to end my world. For the further record, my grandfather never slept again after he read that file, and I would rather like to." They rode a cart that did not survive to the Tessic Flats, and walked the last of it, and found James's ship half buried and singing its 400-year-old politeness at the sky. The transmitter took the correction. 11 characters, 1 seal, 1 prefix. Then they sat down in the salt, the 3 of them, and waited in the dark for a sky that had never once kept a promise. It took 11 hours. They knew because Liam counted them out loud, having nothing else to offer. The lattice acknowledged the order in 9 minutes, a single flat chirp from James's beacon that made all 3 of them leap up like startled birds, and then did absolutely nothing for the rest of the night, because 60,000 kilometers of sail does not simply swing open. It unfurls in a sequence, panel by panel, at a speed determined by engineers who had been dead for 4 centuries and had never in their lives been in a hurry. "It's working," Liam kept saying. "It's queued. It's a job ticket. It's moving up a queue." "That is the least triumphant sentence anyone has ever spoken in a desert," said Elena, lying flat on her back in the salt. Dawn, when it came, arrived with all the ceremony of a light switch. There was no trumpet. The eastern sky simply stopped being a bruise and became, over about 40 minutes, a pale and slightly embarrassed gold. And then the edge of the sun came up over the salt flats and hit 3 people and 1 dead survey ship. And Liam discovered he was making a sound he had no name for. Luna had her hood up and her arm across her face, and she was swearing, steadily, in a language with 4 words for ouch, and she was not going back inside. "It's hot," she said with utter betrayal. "That's the point of it. Nobody said it would be hot." The city took the news badly, which was the funniest and most devastating thing about the entire affair. Half of Elira hid indoors for a week. There were riots against the sun, which is a sentence Liam wrote down so he would believe it later. There were 3 separate petitions demanding the shade be restored on grounds of tradition. A preacher on the Flower Lane announced that the light was a judgment and did excellent business for 11 days until his own congregation, having noticed that the judgment made things visible, stopped coming. Then the vats broke. Not physically, economically. With the sun back, the enzyme regrew in Illyrian blood within 2 months, because it always had, because it had only ever been starving. And when everyone has a thing, nobody can sell it. The Farron Standard did precisely what Adrian's grandfather had calculated on a night he never slept off. It went from a currency to a curiosity in a single season. Ledger vials turned up in gutters. The great bloodhouses discovered that they were, underneath everything, buildings. It was not gentle. Liam refused afterwards to ever describe it as gentle. People lost everything they had ever counted, and some of them never forgave the light for it, and a few of them never forgave him. He learned to live with that particular arithmetic, too. Adrian lost the most and took it, in the end, with a grace that surprised everyone, including himself. He sold the coat. 2 years on, he was running the 5th House cistern as a tour, 6 times a day, walking visitors down the tiered stone benches and telling them in that beautiful, unhurried voice about the auctions that used to happen there. And he always ended at the block, and he always said the same thing. And it was all built on a letter of the alphabet, ladies and gentlemen, so do please check your paperwork. He was very good at it. He slept, he reported, magnificently. Elena was given the archive, formally with a budget, and immediately began gambling the budget, and was formally given the archive again with a smaller budget and a supervisor. James got a stone at the edge of the salt flats with his name on it and the word surveyor, because Liam felt strongly that a man should be remembered for his actual job rather than for 400 years of songs about his taste. Transport 6 came 8 months later. It came down through an open sky onto a swept platform, and it was apologetic in 3 languages, and the steward at the hatch was mortified in the specific way of an employee facing a service failure with no clause for it. There had been an incident with a gate numbering system. A review had been conducted. Liam's luggage was recovered. 41 years of storage fees waived as a goodwill gesture, and he was issued a voucher. He stood on the platform for a long while with the voucher in his hand. He thought about his mattress, which had learned him. He thought about 9 years of being told that a mismatched number was only paperwork, that nobody ever died of a clerical error, and about how it turned out that 400,000 people had. He thought about the fact that Illyria now had an open sky, a collapsed currency, a functioning spaceport with no functioning schedule, and precisely one person on the entire planet who had spent his adult life understanding how goods move between places and what happens when the manifest is wrong. He was, tragically, exactly the man for the job. "You are staying," said Luna behind him. Not a question. She had come out onto the platform because it was the scheduled hour, and she still walked out at the scheduled hour, and she probably always would. "There's no portmaster." "There is no portmaster," she agreed. "And the freight rates here are insane, Luna. I've seen the tables. A man could weep." "Liam." "I'm staying," he said. She stepped out from under the broken lamp, which he had fixed in the spring and which she still stood under anyway, out of the shadow of the terminal awning and into the flat gold light of the middle of the day. She had done this perhaps a dozen times now, and had complained bitterly on every single occasion, and she did it again, at length, with feeling, about the heat and the glare and the outrage of a sky that would not have the decency to stop. Then she took his hand. Inside, in the vast hall where the dust had been swept out and the ticket counters gleamed, the departure board had been reset that morning. It had one entry on it. It had taken Liam 3 days to reprogram, and he had checked the reference number 9 times because he was who he was. Service 1, Kesh Anchorage, departing, tomorrow. Somewhere in this story there is a piece of paper that came back marked reference not recognized, and nobody read it, because it was nobody's job to read it. That is the whole catastrophe. Not a war, not a monster, a letter of the alphabet, and 400 years of people learning to call their hunger a curse because a curse at least has meaning in it. We are very good at that, at building cathedrals of explanation over accidents. Ask yourself how much of what you carry was handed to you as a judgment, when it was only ever an error nobody had the standing to correct. And there is a second thing in this story, quieter than the first. A woman stood under a broken lamp at a port where no ships came, at an hour no one else observed, keeping an appointment with an empty sky. And when a stranger fell out of that sky, she paid for him in milliliters, daily, and never once mentioned it. That is what protection actually looks like. Not the grand gesture. The standing surety, posted quietly, at a cost the protected person is not told about, by someone who has decided you are worth being poorer for. You have been protected like that, almost certainly. By a parent who did arithmetic at a kitchen table after you went to bed, by a friend who said 9 quiet words to someone on your behalf, by a person who walked closer than they needed to on a street you thought was empty. You never saw the ledger. Most of us never see the ledger. So here are the questions to carry out of the dark with you. What error in your life have you stopped questioning because you assumed it was fate? Who has been paying for you, in a currency you never thought to ask about? And when the sky finally opens over you, when the thing you organized your whole life around turns out to have been unnecessary all along, will you have the courage to walk out into that light, squinting, complaining bitterly about the heat, and stay? Liam got on the wrong ship. It was the only correct journey he ever took. The end. Luna and Liam's story ends here, friends. Please show your appreciation for our efforts by pressing the like button below, leaving your thoughts on the story in the comments, and subscribing to Sci-Fi Traveler for the next story. See you in the next Sci-Fi Traveler story. Take care.